I have a watch with me this time, so we won't be watching the thermometer. We want to continue this morning by presenting what we do in Zimbabwe. And I can tell you it's the greatest honor in the world to serve destitute children. The game plan this morning is I want to give you a quick broad brush picture of what we do. We'll show you a video so you can put faces and people to those things. We'll talk a little bit about each facet of the ministry, and then we'll show you another video, and then I want to tell you the story because I want you to understand how wonderful our King Jesus really is. Okay, so that's a game plan. We went to Zimbabwe as foreign investors, not as missionaries, because missionaries had to beg to stay every 2 years. And because we knew we wanted to do orphan projects, we knew we needed to look at time in 20-year blocks. And so we thought, okay, we'll go in as foreign investors. That allows us to get permanent residency within 5 years, and then we can really run with this thing. And Christmas Eve, we'll finish year 25. We're very excited about that. Susan used to worry about, is this long term? I think we did it. The core of our ministry has always been orphan care. And so we have an orphanage with 109 children in full-time residential care. We've just had about 40 that went on to tertiary education, or they were reunited with family members. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do with those kids. We have a medical clinic that's treating a lot of people at no charge, 18,000 a year at no charge. And not only do we have the clinic at the farm, we're doing medical outreach at Mondoro Farm and at Gravelot Farm. And there we provide basic medical care, but we also have, pastors, counselors go out so that we're reaching out to the whole person. We have a private school called Eden Christian Academy. We use accelerated Christian education homeschool curriculum. Our children come to us 2 to 5 years behind in school, and so this is the way they can start where they finished and work their way forward. And so a lot of times our kids are 22 years old when they finish high school. They actually stay with us until they have finished either vocational school or university studies, if they're willing to do the work. So we're different from a lot of orphanages from that standpoint. Our kids aren't booted out the door at 18. They're not ready. We have Straight Paths Discipleship and Evangelism. This is a great program that does spiritual formation with our kids. We want them in a growing relationship with Jesus. But then we also do evangelism in the community, and I'll share more about that later. And then we have Eden Farm. We have to feed our orphans, our staff, and their families, and that can be up to 800 people a day. And so we move mountains of food. And in Zimbabwe, because of drought sometimes, because of things that are happening, we've had food insecurity. And 18 of the 25 years we've been there, we've had food insecurity. And so we've been very focused on growing our own foodstuffs, because if we don't grow them, we cannot necessarily buy them anywhere in the country. And so the Eden Farm is very foundational to making everything else work. And so if we could, let's go ahead and play the overview video. And this will give you a picture. Well, one of the things we have as a goal is to provide holistic orphan care. And what that means, we want our kids to grow up in small family units and not be warehoused in a giant facility with a cafeteria. Because what it boils down to, if you raise a child in a huge dormitory, in a cafeteria, they don't see how family dynamics work. And then they fail as spouses, and then they fail as parents because they've never seen a family. They have no idea what a family is. And so we use a family unit, 2 adults in every cottage. With little kids, it's often a mother and an auntie. With teenagers, it's normally a couple. And so we want to provide the highest quality physical care. We don't always know the HIV status of the children when they come to us. If nutrition is optimal, is right at the top, they often will never get sick. They'll find out they have HIV later, but they've never been ill. We also want to look at spiritually. We want to work with their spiritual formation. We want them to know Jesus. Normally, at least 85% of our kids become Christians because we make sure they understand the only reason you have food in your belly and a safe place to sleep and a safe place to grow up is because Jesus Christ is sovereign. And I should also preface at this point in time, what I'm telling you is nothing about Susan and Kevin. Our part in this whole thing is very, very minimal. What I'm trying to do is be a good eyewitness to what Father God is doing, what Jesus is doing in our midst. And I want to make that clear. We want to provide quality education for the kids. We spoke about that briefly. There's just we just want to look at the whole person. And we've been very fortunate at this point to have a number of children who have finished master's degrees. Now you have to understand, in Zimbabwe, there is no public education. Only those who can afford it get to go. And so for almost all the kids that come to us, their only chance for any education whatsoever is if they're placed with us. And so I get very excited about kids like Stanford Piri, Anyway Mupasewa, there's just Simon Mupasewa. They are at their peak in ministry. They're very well trained. They have their master's degrees. And they're becoming giants in the kingdom. And when I see them, I think, okay, they've got another 50 years in them. I'm going to be compost in my grave when they really hit their peak, and that's okay. Because when I read Hebrews chapter 11, we have this long laundry list of people throughout history who saw God's promises, but they knew they probably wouldn't see everything that God promised in their lifetime, but they pushed ahead to see the kingdom move forward. And so in some ways, I feel like Hebrews 11 is still being written in all of our lives as we help people. And these guys are just giants in the kingdom. I'm very excited about who they are and who they're becoming. And it's very gratifying to see them do so well. Our medical clinic uses a mixture of Western medicine and herbal medicine. The herbal medicine is very cost-effective. It's very thorough. It actually works really well. We can treat 18,000 people for a little over $2 a person a year, and so that works. It's quite effective. I don't think your insurance company's that good. I'm sorry, but it makes sense that God would make everything we need to live on this planet, and so some of the herbal medicines are very powerful. One of my favorite things, we had a surgeon from Springfield, Missouri came, and he's rolling his eyes at all the herbal stuff. And an elderly man came in. He was 81 years old. He had stepped on a thorn and didn't clean the wound, and so after a period of time, it was a huge abscess on his foot. Well, they cleaned it out, and they could see his heel bone. I mean, it was a deep infection. It was a mess. And of course, Judy's treatment is, our nurse, she mashes nasturtium leaves. You probably grow those in your garden or eat them in your salads. She mashes those leaves, packs it in the wound, and the surgeon's rolling his eyes saying, oh yeah, like that's going to help. 2 days later, he came back for a wound dressing change, and the surgeon was absolutely astonished. He said, I can see the infection's gone. I can see the inflammation is gone. I can see that the tissue is regenerating. He said, I can't get that in a hospital setting in 10 days' time. You just made me a believer. So it's very powerful stuff, and we're grateful to be able to reach out to the community because they need the help. We have 226,000 people live on this plateau we live on, and most of them have no access to any type of health care. And so we fill a gap for them. It's a huge deal. And like I said before, we send out our medical team with counselors, pastors. We got a group that do immunizations. We got a nutritionist on staff who helps families who don't understand what the human body needs. You know, we don't run on potato chips, you know, and things like that. And she does a great job. And it's just a powerful aid to these families because they really have no access whatsoever. Eden Christian Academy, you know, the homeschool curriculum works so well. We start our kids as 3-year-olds. So from 3, you know, we go to play school, preschool, kindergarten. Where's my speech therapist? By then, they're fluent in English, and then their academics are in English. One of our goals with our kids is that they are fully fluent in English and fully fluent in Shona. And that way, they have the best options of jobs. We have very high unemployment in Zimbabwe. It gives us a chance to, our kids having an edge over other people who are entering the workforce. Because if you get a good job in the city, you'll be speaking English all day, every day. We were a British colony years ago, and it's just essential. By the time our kids finish high school on ACE, they have memorized the Psalms, the Proverbs, huge tracts of the New Testament, a lot of passages in the Old Testament. They've studied the 69 attributes of God. When they're dissecting sentences in English, it's always biblical principles. It builds so much faith in them as they learn and sharpens their ability to memorize. The kids are in charge of their education, so they have to plan every week, set goals, how much they're going to do, and then get it done. And so when they go to university, they say, well, this is easy. You know, I know how to manage my time. I know how to study. I know how to memorize. It's all good. And so we get very excited about that. We have a range of trade schools that some of our kids go to. And it's always fun when they do that. You know, when Talent went to, you know, restaurant and hospitality, hotel and restaurant, she would come home on breaks and she said, let me make the beds. I said, okay, you can make the beds. And then she'd want to cook too. But we go back to the bedroom and the bedspread was, you know, a swan or a dolphin or something. You could hardly untangle the thing to get in the bed. It's like, stop, please. But it's fun when they, you know, they want to use what they've learned. And, you know, Talent's a good example too. We were able to place her. Most vocational schools, you do your academics and then you do a year's attachment in your profession so that you get the hands-on skills and then you're marketable. And Talent had the great opportunity of cooking at a safari lodge at Amiri Game Park, which is a black rhino breeding station, brings people from all over the world. They have 2 chefs from London, highly skilled chefs. And so she learned all kinds of things about food. And she's grown up and gone now. She is a personal chef to a family in Pretoria, South Africa, and loves what she does. And she's really, really good. So there's just that kind of thing. You know, one of the things about taking care of children, you're planting seeds. You plant those seeds of faith. You plant scripture in them. We know the scripture never comes back void. But sometimes those seeds don't sprout while you're with them. Sometimes it's a delayed germination. And had a great example of that one day. A young man was yelling behind me when I was in Chinoy one day, 65 miles from Doma. And he said, Mr. Fry, it's me, I'm May. Do you remember me? I said, well, of course I remember you. I spent an entire day at a police station from all the lies you told. And he just smiled really big, like, it was such an accomplishment. But he said, I just want you to know, I'm married, I have 2 children. You gave me such a good foundation. And I thought, okay, this kid was on the fat chance list. He left on the worst possible circumstances, but he's in the kingdom. He's in the kingdom, and it's because we were faithful to plant the seeds and make it grow. And I get excited about that. And we've had kids that have gone off to university. Stanford Puri went to Lithuania. Now, this is a place where people eat smoked fish and beets for breakfast. And he just rolled with it. And, we were at a restaurant in Lithuania with him. We went to check on him because he was a kid who would never complain about anything. And we didn't know enough about the school. So we thought, on the way home, we've got to stop in Lithuania. Well, Lithuania is not easy to get to. It's a beautiful little country. But we're in this restaurant, and Stanford orders this drink called gras. Does anybody know what gras is? It's a weak ale made out of rye bread, and they throw raisins in it to sweeten it slightly. It looks like something out of a septic tank, let me tell you. And I said, "What are you drinking?" And he smiled. "It's gras. It's delicious." I don't think so. But he ended up valedictorian at his university, studying in his second language. And that's an accomplishment. Let me tell you, it's a huge accomplishment. But he's doing good ministry with us. He's got his master's in divinity. He's on staff now, doing fantastic things. The Straight Paths Discipleship Program is spiritual mentoring for our kids, spiritual formation. We want to see that relationship expanding and growing. And Stanford, who I just told you about, heads that up. But we also have an evangelism team, and this has been a real eye-opener for us. We live on this plateau as like a finger of development. On two sides of this finger of development are two rivers, the Hunyani and the Angwa rivers. The tsetse flies are rampant in those areas, and they carry African sleeping sickness, so no one has ever lived there. From the tip of the finger of development, 80 miles down to the Zambezi River, it's virgin wilderness. And so it's not unusual for us to have, elephants, lions, hyenas, leopard, all kinds of wildlife wandering through the township. And it's always so exciting. We have a 9-foot game fence around the mission houses where the missionaries have little guys just to keep the predators away from the little guys. But the evangelism we're doing with the people in these communities, there are huge communities on the edge of the wilderness and the back ends of some of these big farms. And you can't drive all the way there. You can only drive part way, and then you have to hike back because there's no road. But you might have 350 to 550 people living on the edge of this wilderness. And they're living subsistence living. They don't have much of anything. They can't read or write. Because they're a part of a storytelling culture, we use disciple-making movement curriculum that's specifically geared for people who cannot read and write and are of storytelling cultures. And so we'll go to these communities. You read the passage of Scripture 3 times, so everybody gets the details, what's going on in the story. Then you ask them, what do you find in this story that makes you feel good and makes your heart sing? And they'll discuss that, and then they'll say, okay, what part of the story really bothers you or you find troublesome? And they'll discuss that. And then the goal from that moment forward is, even if you only know one story, you share that with somebody who was not at the meeting and bring them next week. And so the growth is exponential. So before COVID, we had 58 church plants on this plateau where we live, and it was involving, more than 1,000 people. And so we're excited about that. We've got to pick it back up now that COVID's over, I guess you'd call it. But it's another tool, a very rich tool in the community, because the Africans believe traditionally that it's a form of animism. They're terrified all day, every day of what dead relatives will do to them from the grave. And they're frightened out of their minds that they're going to do something to offend an ancestor and then they'll destroy them. And so what we find is very popular when these guys find out, Jesus sets us free from that. You don't have to worry about your relatives. Jesus will set you free. And the response has been quite good. On the farm side, we have our own beef and dairy cattle. We have broiler rabbits, broiler chickens. We have an egg operation that produces 300,000 eggs a year. I'm frightened to tell you that we eat all of them. There are no extras. So, yeah. go to Albertsons and ask for 300,000 eggs and see what they do. But it's all good. We also produce, the Africans eat cornmeal 3 times a day, porridge in the morning, and then sadza. It's cooked thick so you can make a ball out of it. Then you dip it in your vegetables. They call it relish. It's rape, which is basically like kale, shredded, cooked with onions and tomatoes. And so that's the relish. And that's what people want to eat twice a day. And so we grow the corn we need. Our cooking oil comes from our soybeans. We need 70 tons a year just to have the cooking oil we need. And then the cake is made into livestock feed. It's 20% protein, and so we make our own livestock feeds. We also grow all kinds of tropical fruit, herbs for the clinic, and all kinds of things. So it's a full-blown farming operation that keeps us all healthy and growing. And so one of the things that has changed for us is that we're in 3 locations now. We were in the Pacific Northwest in 2019. We had 1 location. But we are now in Karoi, which is a small town 90 miles from Doma, our main campus. Now, Karoi is an interesting place. The name Karoi means of the witches. This is a hotbed of occultic practices, of witchcraft. There's all kinds of things going on there. And we got a call one day that we needed to take in 28 children from a children's home in Karoi that was abusing the children. And there were 97 children in a facility licensed for 46. We were told, you need to take 28 of them. We had 1 bed. So we had to do a lot of jumping around to get these kids taken care of. But in the end, after speaking with their counselors and speaking with the children, we've discovered the tragedy that they were trafficked, they were drugged, they were forced to participate in satanic rituals, they were not fed properly. There were just all kinds of things happening to those kids that should never happen to any child. But the bigger tragedy is most of the children were on 9-day place of safety orders. And that's when an accusation of abuse or neglect has been made. The police have 9 days to do an investigation. If there's no criminality in it, the kids go home. Or if there's a criminal charges, then there's a court process. For more than half of these kids, they were on those 9-day place of safety orders and have been there for years and years. And so that's the tragedy. But if the Holy Spirit brings those children to your mind, please pray for them, because I don't know that they'll have a normal day in their lives unless Jesus intervenes personally. And that's a hard thing to say, but it's very, very true. Our third location is the Deve mission base. And Deve is 2 hours farther out from Karoi. It is way out in the boonies. But the mission there is headed up by Elijah and Saradzai Teferinyika. Elijah and Saradzai grew up at Eden. They were orphans that came there, and they fell in love and got married. Elijah is a very gifted evangelist. I mean, really, really gifted. But it was interesting. His first divine assignment, when he came to us, he was 10 years old, very thoroughly abused by his aunts and uncles. He was living with an uncle who was one of our contractors. It was bad. It was really bad. And so his first divine assignment, God told him, you go back to the aunts and uncles that abused you. You win them to Christ, you win the whole region to Christ. And so they've been there 3 years now. They're doing fantastic ministry. And I'd like to go ahead and show the second video now. This will tell you Elijah's story. But it'll also be kind of a little bit of a wrap-up, and then I'll share a story, and then we'll be finished.
Kwazwai Mose, my name is Elijah, and this is my story.
Not all stories have the perfect beginning. Elijah's certainly didn't. The year was 1995 in Royal Zimbabwe. While he was still in the womb, Elijah's father completely rejected and abandoned him. And just 3 short years after being born, Elijah's mother died, and he was put into the care of his aunts and uncles. This wasn't a good thing because his aunts and uncles didn't like him at all. They mistreated, abused, and neglected him. There was many days where he'd be sent out to be with the cattle, spending hours and hours and hours, only to come back after long days to there being little to no food left for him. There was many sleepless nights of going to bed on an empty stomach. Mornings waking up wishing that this nightmare would be over. And at one point, Elijah's aunt was so mad about him that she took his birth certificate and ripped it up and threw it out. Something needed to get a national ID, a job, to have a future. But this wasn't the end of Elijah's story. Because around the age of 10, Elijah was brought to Eden. And at Eden, Elijah experienced real love, care, and support for the very first time. He was poured into for years and years. And after a while, he decided to give his life fully to Christ. He was completely changed. He was able to forgive his uncles. And not only was he able to forgive them, but God called him to go back to the very place, to the very uncles who had mistreated him, and to share the glorious gospel with them, to share the gospel that changed his life, that made him a new creation, and to share it with the surrounding people. That's Elijah's story. This is Eden.
Elijah's story is important because we provide a holistic type of child care for every child that comes to Eden, and that has many facets. And Elijah's part of the Straight Paths program, which is an evangelism tool we use in the community. It allows us to do outreach in unreached communities here on this plateau we live on. He's part of that team, but the interesting thing is Elijah heads a mission team at Hurungwe. And Hurungwe is where his uncles live. The uncles that abused him are the ones he's ministering to at Hurungwe. And so he runs that mission station very efficiently. He's done very, very well. Other parts of childcare that are important, nutrition has to be optimal. We never know if a child who comes to us is HIV positive or not. Optimal nutrition is their only hope for staying healthy, even with HIV. And so that's an important part of what we do. Our farm produces most of our foodstuffs, probably about 95%, and that is key to the entire program. We also have our own private school, Eden Christian Academy, and that is for remediation. Almost every orphan who comes to us is far behind in school. They need remediation. They need to learn English as a second language. Our goal is for our children to be fully bilingual by the time they finish high school, and so that's an important part of helping these kids achieve. We keep our children until they finish vocational school or university studies if they're willing to go that far. Our medical clinic provides herbal medical care that is very effective, very helpful. We know that the children have health issues often if they have HIV, and so we have nursing staff on staff to be at their disposal at all times. We also do community outreach, which allows us to treat up to 16,000 people a year at no charge at our medical clinic. And that creates tremendous goodwill in the community. We use partnerships with Christians like you to make everything happen for these kids. But we need those partnerships. There are many children like Elijah out there, and they need help. They need help from you, and it's amazing when we invest in the kingdom how God brings fruit out of it. And we just pray that you'll join us and be partners as we help these children. One thing I neglected to mention, the outreach we're doing to these remote communities, almost without exception, these people have never heard of Jesus. They have no idea who he is, what he did, or what he offers. And that was a shocker. You know, they say, oh, Zimbabwe's a rich nation. Not in our part of the country. I want to finish with a very short story, and then we'll go eat lunch. But it's one of the most poignant stories of our entire history. The very first child we took in was Alexandra. She was 10 years old, full-blown AIDS, very, very sick little girl. This was back when we did not have access to antiretroviral drugs. We knew when we took her in that we were her last stop. She was able to tell us that her mother was a prostitute. Her mother started selling her when she was 3 years old. So by the time we got her as a 10-year-old, she was one of the most abused human beings we've ever encountered. And we've worked with abused kids for 47 years now, I think. But we were fortunate that she was fluent in English and Shona, so she could tell us from a child's perspective what it was like to die from AIDS. And it was very instructive as the first child for us to learn that. And she was smart enough to realize her childhood was completely abnormal. She was also smart enough to realize she was never going to grow up, and she was livid. She was angry. She felt like she'd been cheated out of everything, and she was absolutely right. And the day she came, we had her come to lunch and visited with her a little bit. It was obvious she didn't trust adults, but why would she? Adults had failed her every single time. And so I told her, I said, you know, I had to break the ice with her somehow and start building trust. I said, Alexandra, you know what? I've got a dog that can smile. You're a liar, she says. Well, let's go see if we can find Shirley. And so the whole way through the house, I'm praying, Lord, please have the dog at the back door, and please let her smile like she usually does. So we go out the back door. I call, Shirley, come here. She comes right around the corner. She was right there. And I said, Shirley, can you smile for me? Alexandra just cracked up laughing. She sat down and started petting the dog, and I told her, I will never lie to you, even if it's about the tough stuff. I will never lie to you. And that broke the ice. Over time, she trusted us implicitly. Now, she was typical of a lot of AIDS patients. She had multiple internal illnesses, but she had sores all over her. She had a really badly infected place on her left arm, and Dr. Gwazai said, I want to cut a 1-inch cube out of her arm. We'll pack that with iodine and cotton, and then this will heal, and then we'll have a recovery. And so she had that surgery one morning, and while they were waiting for Susan to come get Alexandra and her house mother, Alexandra got really excited. Auntie Aji, can you see? And Hashpiri said, I don't see anything, Alexandra. What are you seeing? She said, I see Jesus in the clouds. He's smiling. He says it's okay for me to come home now. But I want to tell you, I know it was a genuine encounter, because from that moment forward, she was not angry. She was not bitter. She had that peace that passes all understanding. She died 4 weeks later with more grace and dignity than anybody we've ever been with. I want to serve the kind of God who's willing to show up in person if necessary to bring a wounded daughter home safely. And I think you want to serve that same kind of God too. Thank you for letting us share. We appreciate your interest in missions, and we look forward to great things happening.